Do you want this helmet, or how about this brand new one-up chain guide? All three of these items are brand new. All you got to do is subscribe and you will be entered for a chance to win one of these three items. So once again, thanks for your time. This is a way for me to show appreciation, and yeah, on to the video. This is an unfortunate video to do, talking about really the unprecedented state of professional enduro racing and the fact that we are realistically looking at a potential future where this series no longer exists. If you are a fan of the sport, you are probably already well aware of the decline over the past couple of years. Numerous teams have left professional enduro racing, the EWS, the Enduro World Series. Trek has announced for 2025 they are not going to be racing. Riders like Richie Rude are going to be focusing more on downhill. He's still going to be defending his enduro title, but it's pretty clear that he is prioritizing downhill, with Yeti's focus on building the World Cup team. Martin Mays, also a top enduro athlete, is moving over to the Orbea FMD downhill team. He will not be participating in enduro whatsoever, focusing exclusively on downhill. Ibis enduro team has left, and this is really just a reoccurring theme. And it really does beg the question as to whether the EWS is going to exist in 2026. It is at an undeniable all-time low. I still remember kind of when the sport broke onto the scene and the incredible rise in popularity and participation from grassroots racers. It kind of captured what mountain bikers love about mountain biking. It's not downhill, it's not cross country, it's what is most relatable to your average mountain biker going out there and riding trails for a couple of hours. But unfortunately, that has not been enough to sustain the popularity, and it is looking bleak. The industry struggles are an undeniable factor in this. When companies are making less money, when there's literally companies going bankrupt, obviously racing budgets are likely to be cut, and it's likely that they're going to be among the first items to sort of get the axe. So this is a scary moment in the sport. People are losing their jobs. Teams are leaving the sport. And I legitimately am not sure whether the series will continue past 2025. The dates are in for 2025, so there is going to be at least one more year of it. But based on what we're seeing, it's hard to feel optimistic. And I just want to emphasize that I take no joy in making this video. I love enduro racing. I love the athletes. I think it's fantastic for the sport. But unfortunately, the reality is what it is. And I'm going to be talking about a few of the reasons that I believe contributed to the situation that we're in. And hopefully, if there are any things that could potentially be done differently to try to resurrect this sport that we love. So the first and most primary challenge that elite enduro racing had, still has, and will continue to have is the difficulty in broadcasting. So professional enduro racing is typically 4 to 6 stages over either 1 or 2 days, either at a bike park or a large, expansive kind of trail network area. And as you can imagine, the logistical hurdle of capturing, I don't know how many riders enter the average enduro EWS race, but for argument's sake, let's say 100. You can imagine the difficulty in trying to capture 100 different race runs on 4 to 6 different trails, many of which are multiple miles in length, and over the course of 1 to 2 days. Even if you had the money to do so, it would take a small army of videographers, of electronics. If you've ever seen the World Cup coverage, it is quite an ordeal just to capture one run, let alone multiplying that by 4 to 6. It's just an incredibly challenging logistical sort of puzzle to solve. And that's before you factor in the realization that there's just not enough money to warrant it. On behalf of the event organizers, the prospect of investing whatever it would take to do it just doesn't really make sense from an X's and O's standpoint. That is why enduro racing has never been broadcasted live. And In 2025, the era of streaming and pretty much anything being available on demand at your fingertips, it's pretty obvious that that formula is a problem for the average fan that isn't as dedicated to the sport. The prospect of not getting to watch a race live and instead having to wait typically 1 or 2 days afterwards, it's generally a 20 to 30 minute highlight video. It's just not a winning formula. And this is not me criticizing any strategic moves on the organizer's part. It's just the reality. It's a difficult sport to capture. It's not conducive to spectating and broadcasting. And that really is, in my opinion, probably the most fundamental issue that enduro has and still faces. Number two is the stigma that enduro racing, there's a unfortunately kind of negative phrase that people throw around, and that is enduro or professional enduro racing is for the people that can't cut it in World Cup downhill and can't cut it in World Cup cross country. And while I don't believe this is necessarily fair, it's hard to argue that this is a prevailing opinion. And the reason is because enduro fits in this kind of awkward middle ground between sort of the racing disciplines that I regard as kind of the pinnacle of the sport. If you're looking for the fastest riders down the mountain, you are going to be watching a World Cup downhill. If you want the fittest mountain bikers on the planet, you're going to be watching World Cup cross country, or take it even a step further and watch professional road cycling with races like Tour de France and Paris-Roubaix, etc. Enduro has this difficult job in terms of marketing itself because it doesn't necessarily represent the pinnacle of the sport. One of the other challenges that the sport has, and that is it's never attracted the marquee name. So in mountain biking, many of the biggest names in the sport are either World Cup downhill athletes like Loic Bruni, Greg Minnaar, Aaron Gwin, or top World Cup cross-country racers like Nino Schurter. Enduro was never able to get these riders to participate in some of their events, and in my opinion, that is also one of the hurdles that they faced, is these kind of big breakout household name for mountain biking. Keep in mind, for mountain biking, but Loic Bruni is one of the biggest names in the sport of mountain biking. Greg Minnaar, Aaron Gwin. You need these riders participating at your events to really elevate the notoriety, because the amount of eyeballs and attention and hype around a rider like Loic Bruni, who is arguably probably the biggest name in the sport right now, he will alone bring tens of thousands of fans over to watch it and to participate in it. I can myself attest that if I saw a enduro schedule announcement mentioning that Loic Bruni is going to show up, it would probably be the most excited I would have ever been for an enduro. Not to say that I'm not already excited with enduro and the racers that compete in it, but to see a rider like Loic Bruni, a world-class downhill athlete, to compete against the best enduro athletes would be incredible. Now, Valley Hall did race at least one race, and I know there has been top downhill racers that have raced enduro races, Connor Fearon, Troy Brosnan, but as of yet, at least not to my recollection, we have not gotten those big marquee household names in. If I was part of the sort of organizing body of enduro, I would literally offer financial compensation to some of these big downhill and cross-country dudes to try to get them to show up, just to sort of create the hype and excitement that they have from their fans and sort of their media following, to show up, tune in, and hopefully become a fan of the sport. So when I was talking about potential ideas to improve it, that is one. I would call up Loic Bruni and offer him whatever, $5,000 to $10,000 to race an enduro race. I assume he would, and chances are it would probably be the highest viewed enduro race ever. I could be wrong, but if I were to guess, or Nino Schurter, you need these names to bring in the eyeballs beyond just the hardcore fans. And when they are not participating, you are just at a pretty significant limit in terms of the level of popularity that you're going to be able to get access to. Lastly, the big factor in this situation is one that doesn't have anything to do with the sport. That is the industry situation, and more specifically, the schedule and organizing changes on behalf of Warner Brothers Discovery. They have implemented very broad, sweeping changes, how you get access to World Series team status, what the cost, the fees, and everything is involved for racing and participating in downhill, XC, and enduro. And ultimately, the lengthening of the race schedule to 10 races played a big role in many companies having to essentially ask themselves, we cannot go full into enduro, cross country, and downhill. We have to pick the two and focus on that exclusively. And for many of these teams, when you look at the eyeballs, sort of the marketing and the ROI, enduro was simply not cutting it, and they would overwhelmingly focus on downhill and enduro. Now, there are teams that also left the downhill World Cup circuit, but for many of the teams that have kind of pulled out of enduro, they have redirected their focus and resources into downhill. And so it's hard not to come to the conclusion that the structural changes in the rules, in the team status, the fees, the schedule was really the final domino to fall against enduro, where you already had teams struggling financially. You already had them looking as to whether they wanted to continue in the sport of enduro. And then you get the prospect of, if they were to remain in enduro, with the significant increase in cost, because as we know, the more races that these teams have to participate in, the more expensive their yearly budget is. They were looking at, we pretty much just cannot afford to fund 3 factory race teams or 3 different factory race disciplines, enduro, downhill, in World Cup cross country. And so instead, many teams such as Trek Factory Racing decided to cut their enduro team. And this is unfortunately doesn't have anything to do with the sport. There's not really anything we can do to change it. It's just an unfortunate sort of confluence of factors that really worked against them. And like I said, I think that was kind of the final sort of domino to fall to really push a lot of teams towards the door. It's unfortunate. It sucks. In terms of ideas to improve it, I'm really not sure. Obviously, it being run under a different organization would probably be the most sort of hopeful prospect in terms of changing it and turning it around. But ultimately, the industry struggle is really a big factor in it. Bike sales are down, profit is down, and when that happens, race team budgets are going to be cut. I want to know what you guys think. What is your opinion? Agree, disagree? Do you love enduro as much as I do? I want to know what you guys think. Do you have any ideas? I honestly don't, and it's not that I don't want to have some quick, simple solution to resolve it, but I honestly don't. There's challenges that are just kind of hard to navigate, and they are unique to elite enduro racing. So it's a crappy video to make. It sucks to see. I don't want to see it go away, but it is not looking good. So I want to know what you guys think, and yeah,